Now we are on to the methodology section. The methodology section is designed to tell your reader exactly what you're doing. What you've done in your paper. How did you generate the results, which you'll discuss in a later section. As I've tried to emphasize, a research paper, there shouldn't be any mystery to it. There shouldn't be any surprises. There shouldn't be a sudden twist. Right? We want to lay everything out for the reader as we go. And so before you do whatever you do, you want to tell the reader what that is so that they can sort of look at it and make sure that they are going to trust whatever you do, right? That the data is coming from a source that they believe in, or that it was collected in a reasonable way, and that the tools you're using to analyze it are correct tools. And so with this section, we want to walk through both our data and the analytical technique that we're going to use. And so this is working in this document that I'm building out for my paper. I'll add a new section now. Methodology. And the checklist that I put in the final paper description, I think is actually pretty detailed and gives you a really good idea of the different points you want to hit, but you don't want to list these out as sort of bullet points. These are just the different bits of content that you want to include. You want to make sure that you mention. So the first thing I say is to describe the data that you're using. You didn't collect this data. You probably don't have a great idea of where it's coming from, but I give you a description in this document of the data that you're using. And it's here towards the beginning. The data is from the General Social Survey. And so what you want to start your methodology section by is describing the data that you're going to use. And you may want to reiterate what your research question is. You want to constantly remind your reader what you're doing. Help them to sort of ground them with each section of, oh yeah, that's what we're doing. That's what all of this is building towards. So in this paper, predictors of people's views towards spending on space. In order to analyze that, answer that, I use data from the General Social Survey. Right? I'm going to want to rewrite this paragraph in my own words. Unfortunately for me, this paragraph, the original, is my own words, so I'm going to have to reword it again. But you want to take this and sort of give the reader an idea of where did this data come from. So it's data from the General Social Survey in 2018, collected by the National Opinion Research Center. Has observations for, I forget exactly how many people. I'm going to have to go into R to figure that out. 14,015. And so I'll reword this into sort of clear sentences before the final draft, right? But this is the basic idea. And if you're a reader and you're sort of familiar with social science, you see that you're getting data from the General Social Survey. It's from the year 2018. You're like, you're great, right? This data is good. It was collected by people that I trust. I know that the data isn't sort of being made up or being played around with or is coming from a source I don't trust. So then I want to describe the actual variables I'm using. For my dependent variable, I will use whether the person agrees with the statement that the US spends too little on space exploration. All right, so that's my dependent variable. I want to tell my reader very clearly what is my dependent variable. And now I've checked box 3. All right, so box 1 or box 2 was where's the data coming from. Box 3 is the dependent variable. To study that, I use 3 independent variables. Earlier, I said that I was going to use party ID, degree, and age. And so I want to identify my 3 independent variables, party ID. So I don't want to use the actual name of the variable as it's coded in the data, right? I want to actually describe what the variable is. So I'll use party, registered party, as predicting that Democrats will be more likely to think we spend too little on space. I'll use age, predicting that older people be more likely to think we spend too little. And what was my third variable? Degree. In education, predicting that higher levels of education will think we spend too little. All right, and again, I will come back and make all of this into better sentences before submitting the paper, but this is just to get my ideas down and to make sure that I'm hitting on everything in this checklist in a sort of initial draft. I want to identify the type of each variable, right? Party is categorical with Democrat, Republican, and independent in the data. Age is continuous and measured for each year. Education is ordinal, is numerical and ordinal. From 1 to 5. Okay, so I'm giving my reader, again, a really clear description of exactly what all my variables look like. So I want to provide summary statistics for all of those variables, and so I'm going to have to go into R to do that. And so I've got my data read in as DAT. I want to produce summary statistics for my 4 variables, and so I'm going to create a new object called DAT2. And I'm going to extract just the 4 variables that I'm using. So NatSpec, party ID, age, and degree. And so when I run that space, I misspelled party. Right, and so I couldn't figure out which variable I was misspelling. That's what the error message was telling me, that an undefined column was selected, which means it doesn't have the name of one of these things. I couldn't figure out which one I'd misspelled. So I looked at all of the names again and realized that party ID was missing the Y. And so now this will execute because I added the E to NatSpec, which I knew wasn't spelled NatSpace. And there we go. right? The frustrations of bugs in your code will never end. But so now I've got this object which only has 4 variables, the 4 that I'm interested in. And so I can produce a summary table for that dat2. And I can go and I can take this and put it in my document here. As I talked about in the video for the final exam review, Courier is the default text or font in R, and so everything will look better if you make it Courier. It'll sort of line up. You could see sort of, I guess I'll do this side by side. Sort of default is whatever you're using in Word, which is Calibri. The numbers don't quite line up correctly. If you change it to Courier, you'll be able to read it a lot easier. Courier, Courier new, any of them will work. You can make the entire document Courier, Courier new, or just the tables, and that's sort of just a finishing point. So now I've got summary statistics for these variables, right? I can see what the average, right, that 20% of people said that we spend too little on space. The most common party ID for people is independent other. The average age is 43.88, 44, very close to the median. Most people are sort of low on this scale of 1 to 5 education. So I've provided summary statistics. I want to insert a graph for my dependent variable. And so for most of you, your dependent variable is going to be categorical, dichotomous. So there's only 2 categories. It's not continuous. And so the best way to graph it is going to be with a bar chart. And so this will be fairly useful for most students. And so I'm going to do a bar plot, and I want to do table. And I can either use dat or dat2. It's both the same in terms of making a bar plot for just my dependent variable. And so this is what the most basic NARSPAC. See, this is where I wish I had someone that, or actually just the concern to edit these videos and take out these bugs, but this is coding. You're gonna make typos. So I misspelled Nat space in the first one because I thought that RStudio was going to finish it out for me, and it didn't. And then I spelled it NARSPAC, which R does not know it is, and there is my bar plot. This is a very, very basic bar plot. It does not look as good as it possibly could. So let's just do a few customization options to make it look a little bit better. I will add a title, bar chart for so I'll add a title, identifying what the variable is again. You can add it, you can do different titles if you want. I want to update so the x-axis is showing 0 and 1, which doesn't sort of make sense sort of without the context of what does that mean. And so I'm going to add names to those of no and yes. And then I'm going to add color. Let's just go with blue for now. Maybe navy. I don't actually know if navy is a color in R. It is. Right, so what this bar chart, and so let me take this and copy it. So now I've got my chart here, checking another box, sort of graph my dependent variable. Right, with this summary statistics and the bar chart, I'm going to want to tell the reader what they're saying, right? You don't want to just give them a graph and just assume that they'll interpret it or that they'll even look at it, right? So I want to add a sentence, right? Summary statistics are shown below, as shown in the graph. Roughly 20% of people agreed we spend too little on space exploration, right? I always want to sort of ground anything I'm putting in, any tables, any graphs, I want to ground that with a description of why is that going into the paper, right? So the final thing that I ask is for you to make a prediction about why why the independent variable is being included, or what is sort of the prediction. And I actually had already done this, right? I predicted that party ID will be more likely, or that Democrats will be more likely to think we spend too little on space, older people, and so I've already checked this box. And so this is the methodology, right? And so the final thing that I want to do is make sure that I tell the reader that what we're doing is a regression, right? That shouldn't be a surprise when we get to the next section. And so at the sort of top or here, I study these 3 independent variables using multiple regression. And so this is the bare bones of what will go into your methodology. You'll want to write better sentences, but this is sort of the content that you want to cover. And this is going to put you, situated you so that when you get to the results and suddenly there's a regression table with these variables, you're like, I already knew that was coming, right? You're ready to interpret and go forward. And so this is the methodology. And so in the next video, I'll talk about the results, which will both be me running my regression and then talking about how interpreting that in sort of a bare bones way.